chance to share.
Welcome, everybody. We'll take just one more minute for everyone to join on. Great. Hi, everyone. I think we will go ahead and get started. So welcome to Hawk Mountain Sanctuary Stay-at-Home Speaker Series. Today's program is Turkey Vultures, Love at Second Sight with Dr. Dan Varland. Hi, Dan. How are you?
Just fine.
My name is Riley Davenport. I'm an educator and raptor specialist here at Hawk Mountain, and we are so glad you are all joining us today. Hawk Mountain Sanctuary is the world's very first refuge for birds of prey, and we continue to work hard to be leaders in raptor conservation, science, and education locally and globally around the world. Hawk Mountain is a private nonprofit, and membership is the lifeblood of our organization. And to all of our members, thank you for your continued support. And if you're joining us today and you're not a member, we hope you consider becoming one in the future. We are excited to offer our local and global programming to a variety of audiences, and Hawk Mountain greatly appreciates and depends on donations. Just so everyone is aware, today's program is being recorded. The video will then be accessible on our YouTube channel as a continued resource. At any time during today's program, if you would like to ask Dr. Varland a question, there is a Q&A feature that's at the bottom of your screen. You can click on it, submit your question at any time, and we will go ahead and answer some questions at the end of the presentation. We are so excited that Dr. Varland is here today joining us to talk about his study on turkey vultures. And before we get started, I'm going to share a little bit of his background with our audience today. So Dan earned his Bachelor of Science and Master of Science degrees in zoology from Eastern Illinois University and a PhD in animal ecology from Iowa State University. For 11 years, Dan taught biology at community colleges in Minnesota and Iowa. Then Dan moved to Hoquiam, Washington in 1993 and worked until 2009 as a wildlife biologist for the timber company Rayonier. Since 1995, Dan has been surveying and banding raptors on Washington's coastal beaches, from ocean shores to the Long Beach Peninsula. In 2009, he founded and became the executive director of Coastal Raptors, a not-for-profit organization focused on research, education, and conservation programs for raptors in coastal environments. In 2018, Dan was given the Exceptional Service Award by the Raptor Research Foundation for his volunteer service to the organization. Dan was co-editor of a book on raptors in human-altered landscapes and has co-authored 20 scientific publications and 2 book chapters. Enough for me. I'm going to pass it on over to you. And I'm going to mute myself, turn off my camera, but I'm here if you need anything. Thank you, everyone, so much again for joining us.
Well, thanks a lot for the introduction, Riley. I really appreciate it. And it's a pleasure to be here joining you all today. So I'm going to share my screen now and go to my PowerPoint, which is right here. Whoops, that's not it. Right here, and I divided it into 2 parts because sometimes the file size becomes a problem and the slides don't advance. So I've got a part 1 and a part 2, just hopefully keep things moving along. So the title, Turkey Vultures, Love at Second Sight. I'm going to start by giving you a little overview of what I'll talk about this evening. First, a little bit about Coastal Raptors, the organization. Secondly, a little bit on the turkey vulture natural history. And thirdly, the turkey vulture tracking research that Coastal Raptors has been involved with over a 10-year period, actually. So, as Riley said, the organization was founded in 2009, and the raptor survey work actually started as far back as 1995 that I'm involved in. And we just redid the website over this past year, and it's really good. I'm real proud of it. I think Dale Larson, I sent him the link to this. He's probably listening here, and he's the one that did the background for this new website in WordPress. So so I invite you to go there and learn more about coastal raptors, coastalraptors.com. And we have a variety of different research projects we've been involved in. And we have a blog that I've started, and there's 4 entries so far, and there should be many more in the months and years to come. The last one being remembering one of our favorite peregrine falcons that died earlier this fall, and just the kind of the life and times of that particular bird are featured on the blog. So as I said, long-term research, raptor monitoring on the Washington coast dating back to all the way back to 1995 with surveys and banding and documenting raptor use of those coastal beaches. So those beaches are Ocean Shores, Grayland, and Long Beach, and stretching through southwest Washington. Some of the vulture work I'm going to talk about tonight has actually occurred on the Oregon coast as well, as you'll see as we move through this. But the bulk of the field work over the years, both with vultures and other species, has been done on or near these beaches. So I live on the north side of Grays Harbor, and this wonderful estuary on the west coast of Washington State, one of 2, the other being Willapa Bay, just below it. And over the years, we focused the banding efforts on peregrine falcons and published 6 papers on peregrines over the years, with bald eagles ranking 2nd, and turkey vultures ranking 3rd as tagging and not banding. So we put visual identification band on one leg, and then a U.S. Geologic Survey silver band on the other that we anodize either red or blue, depending on the beach where the bird was banded. And the bald eagles that we catch are banded with also 2 bands, a visual identification band on one leg and a USGS band on the other. In this case, they're silver. And of course, if you happen to see a banded or tagged bird, it's good to report it to the bird banding lab. And all you have to do is type bird band into Google, and it'll take you right to this point right here, where you can go in and document and report your sighting. And they, in turn, the banding lab will get back to you and let you know where it was banded and by whom and when. And then the bander gets a notification from the bird banding lab, the federal bird banding lab out of Laurel, Maryland, as to when the bird was banded, who saw the bird, and the particulars about the person that recited the bird. The banding lab gets back. So we're required to, on an annual basis, report the birds we've banded over the year to the bird banding lab, the federal lab, and also most states require state reports and state permits. I have a federal permit from the US GS banding lab, and I have a state permit from Washington State to do the kind of work I do. Well, I mentioned the turkey vultures being tagged and not banded, and as it turns out, the bird banding lab won't let us put a band on a turkey vulture, and that's because they have this behavior of pooping on their legs. And why do they do that? Well, they do that, it's a cooling mechanism, and it's also believed to kill bacteria that are on their legs and feet. As we all know, they're carrion eaters. and they find themselves walking around in some pretty nasty places, and it's believed that the acidic nature of their feces kills bacteria and is helpful that way. So here's what a tagged turkey vulture looks like in flight. And they're really fit aerodynamically, well suited for wearing a wing tag. Here, this image shows different types of wing shapes in birds. And I'll give you a second to look at that. And so the turkey vulture is in the passive soaring, has passive soaring wings. And this is so the tags don't really, because of the way they fly, they don't really impede their ability to fly or forage. Of course, they're carrion eaters. And the tags that we put on are basically the same kinds of tags that are put on cattle and sheep. We use an applicator just like the egg people do. And those, of course, are punched, through an ear. And we punch these right through the wing, through a part of the wing called the patagium. We create a hole with a dermal punch. And then we're very careful in placement to avoid blood vessels, nerves, tendons, things like that. And they don't even flinch when they do this, and they can wear these things for years. We've got birds out there that have been wearing these tags for 10 years. So moving on to talk a little bit about the natural history of the species. I want to start out with a few jokes here. They're brunt of a lot of jokes, and this is one of my favorites. You see a lot of these in cartoons. Here's another. And a third one. And this, I really like this. I am a turkey vulture, yes indeed. My head is bare to prevent rotting flesh from adhering to it. To keep cool, I poop on my legs and feet. My main defense, projectile vomiting. I am so awesome. Well, I've handled over 50 turkey vultures, and I've never really had one projectile vomit on me. I don't think it's as common as this implies. I have had them kind of lean their head down and vomit to the ground, so you have to kind of watch for that. And I have heard it does occur, but I haven't personally, lucky for me, experienced it, at least so far. I wanted to not go any further without recommending this book to you on the Vultures of the World by Keith Bilstein, the retired director of Sarcosucobian director of avian conservation at Hawk Mountain Sanctuary, there for nearly his whole career, and now retired. And in retirement, he completed this book, and it's just a Bible, a wonderful compendium information about these 23 species. Some of the information I'm going to share tonight, I got from this book that just came out this year. So turkey vultures, gotta love them, warts and all. They provide vital ecosystem services. They decrease the spread of disease. I mentioned the acidic nature of their feces, and it's known for killing anthrax and botulism and hog cholera, for example. So as it passes through the system, they recycle nutrients through the environment. They're very important. And they're beautiful in flight. Well, Cathartes aurea is the scientific name, and the Cathartes is based on, means purifier, and it's a Greek word that means purifier, and aura is the Mexican word for turkey vulture. They have a unique flight in that their wings when in flight are not held straight out as they are in eagles. They're tipped up in a dihedral. You look at that far left image and you can see it best there. And they rock back and forth, left, right, and tip as they fly. And this allows them to be capable of low altitude soaring flight. And that's important to them for locating food sources, to be able to soar close to the ground at low and not expend very much energy in doing it. There's a wonderful paper on this that Keith is one of the co-authors on that describes their soaring flight that I recommend to anybody that wants to dig deeper into this. And Keith actually has through several paragraphs describing their soaring flight in his book, his recent book as well. So you might also see turkey vultures with their wings out like this, and they use the sun to warm themselves and to rid themselves of water that has condensed overnight on the feathers, or from rain, just to facilitate evaporation of water off the feathers. Turns out when they and they're very young after they fledge, they have a dark head, not a red head. And sometime during that first year, it turns to a red color. And frankly, I'm not quite sure when that is, but I've seen them into the fall. This photo was taken into the fall on the Long Beach Peninsula with this. And at some point, say this second 6 months of life, somewhere in there, I think is where the transition occurs. So here's that same vulture on the left and an older one on the right. And if you look at the tip of that one on the right, you can see it's kind of dark. And here it's not that particular bird, but it's a good close-up view of the bill, and you can see it's gray. So at age 1, the bill is gray, and then from 2 on, it's all ivory like this. And so we catch them in the spring and summer for our research, and we age them as either 1-year-olds or adults, the 2 years old or older. We classify them as adults, but actually I don't, from a little bit I've read about when they begin to breed, I think it's really years after that. I think the 5-6 years of age when they start to breed. So they have pass-through nostrils, which is very handy if to help prevent food from getting stuck in there. And you can see the ear opening on the side. And if you look closely at the tongue here, you can see the barbs like sticking back, and that helps to guide the food into the throat. And all vulture species have this. Well, here's the range of the turkey vulture, and you can see the breeding range and the year-round range there, and the turkey vulture is technically considered to be a partial migrant, not a complete migrant. That is, some of the birds migrate. It turns out it's a very large segment of the North American population that does, and as you'll see, but they're classified as partial migrants because they not all of them do migrate. They're the most widely distributed vulture species in the world, with the second most widely distributed being the black vulture. The total global population of the turkey vultures is estimated at 13 million birds, according to Keith's book. And relatives of the turkey vultures, it was once believed that for a number of years, it was believed that their closest relatives were the storks. As it turns out, they're raptors, and they descended from they're in a group of vultures called the New World vultures, 7 in that group, and they are descended from all New World vultures from the Old World vultures, and they all have anatomical features, genetic features that point to a common origin with other raptors. So they don't have sharp claws and grasping feet like as we typically think of hawks and owls, but they have a sharp beak. And as I said, they're technically considered raptors. There's 2 families of vultures and 23 species, as I mentioned a minute ago. New World vultures and Old World vultures, two broad categories. So this shows the distribution of these vultures through the world. And you can see that North America has fewer than many other parts of the world, with South America having large numbers, and Africa certainly many, in Asia, many birds. So that these are the 7 species of New World vultures here. And the turkey vulture is one of 3 vultures that has a very strong sense of smell, the other 2 being those species of yellow-headed vulture. And so when they're soaring around and soaring close to the ground, as I mentioned earlier, they also, of course, are using their sense of smell. It's very acute. It's known that California condors will follow turkey vultures to food sources. They don't have that sense of smell. And Old World vultures, there are 16 species of those birds found in Africa and Asia and that part of the world. As far as nesting goes, they'll nest in abandoned buildings, tree cavities, broken tops of trees, down logs on the ground, hollow logs, or even, brush piles, thick ground vegetation, unused mammal burrows, cliffs, caves, places like that. They typically lay 2 eggs. This is what a turkey vulture looks like in the nest at 40 to 45 days of age in a barn. And here, this was in Alberta. I visited a site that was being monitored by the late Wayne Nelson, who had studied turkey vultures and for many years. Well, food and feeding, they are obligate scavengers, as are all other vultures, and they are the only obligate scavenging vertebrate animals. Many others scavenge. In fact, even peregrine falcons, the fastest animal on the planet, stoops to scavenging from time to time. We wrote a paper on that and saw surprisingly quite a bit of it on the coastal beaches, where lots of things wash up dead. And so you might check that out if you're interested under publications on the Raptor Research. I'm sorry, the Coastal Raptors website. Here's some a sea lion carcass. Okay, so that is the end of part 1, and I'm going to move on to the next part 2 here. This will be on tracking. Okay, so here's a little overview of our efforts here. Wing tagging, we started wing tagging, as I said, 10 years ago. We've put wing tags on a total of 61 so far. We started doing telemetry with transmitters in 2018, thanks to a great deal from a great collaboration with the Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. And we put 3 transmitters on in 2022, that is this last summer. And this part of the research isn't very well developed yet, and so I'm really not going to address this tonight. And we plan to put on 2 more transmitters. We have 2 more that we're going to put on next summer coming up, and David Barber is going to join us from Hawk Mountain. And then also David Landis, who's a grad student at California State Polytechnic University in Pomona. And his major professor is Andrea Bonasoli Alquani. And they're both listening to this presentation here. And we're real excited to have him come up and participate. And he's going to be working with some of our data, not just from these birds, but from the summer of 23, but others that we've got out there with transmitters on. And I wanted to mention also Jill Radcliffe, who has works for Pacific Northwest Raptors in Duncan, British Columbia, and she's also involved then in turkey vulture research, and put transmitters on 2 birds last spring, and I went up and helped with that, and she's got like 5 more transmitters to put out. She's going to try to get some out this winter. Most turkey vultures migrate, but there are some that stay on Vancouver Island all winter, and she's very interested in finding out about those birds and what kind of movement patterns they have. And she has a graduate student, Kara Hughes, who is working with her, and will work with some of the that work with the data that is collected from these birds, so on the movement patterns. So back to 2018, JF Therian came out and helped. He was here for about a week, and we caught 4 birds over that period of time, and was the guy in charge of putting on the transmitters. You might notice that bird doesn't exactly have a red head there. Well, what happens when they get stressed is the blood leaves their head, and they just don't look very good. Looks kind of pale, but he settled down, and this is Grayland, one of our tag birds, and this bird still around all these years later, and has migrated to Mexico for the fifth winter. So there's JF with the 4 transmitters that we got. So 2 of those were purchased by Coastal Raptors at $4,000 a piece, and 2 by Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. So it was a very collaborative project, and the first 2 transmitters that they put on were Coastal Raptors was responsible for paying the data download fees, which range per bird at more than $600 a year per bird. I think it's up to about $700 now, something like that. And so as it turns out, that the birds that are still out there are the ones Coastal Raptors is covering the costs on, and I'm happy to do it, happy to be part of the collaboration in this marvelous study. That's a big part of what Hawk Mountain Sanctuary has been doing over the years. So there's the wing tags. We also wing tag these birds, and JF said we got to name them too. So each bird got named after the and we waited, of course, till we had the birds in hand and decided, what would be best. And so Artful Dodger and Airy were trapped at the Ocean Shores Airport, so we gave them appropriate names. And Coy was trapped using a dead coyote as bait, so that's where his name comes from. And Grayland was trapped on the beach, and the closest town was Grayland, Washington, and that's the name of that beach. We call that Grayland Beach. So that's the name that bird got. We don't know the gender of these birds, by the way. I have a tendency, I guess, because I'm a male, to say he rather than she, but we really don't know the gender. We haven't done blood. We didn't do blood tests, and you can't tell the gender by measurements, by size differences. And Zoe Greenberg came out with JF and helped trap. And there she is, and she's got some snares on a fishing line over a carcass there, and that's the way that Hawk Mountain traps typically is using this approach. Turned out it didn't work very well on our birds, and I think we talked about it and found out it does best when you have large numbers of vultures fighting over the food, and that way, you know, they're moving around a lot, shifting their feet, and they're more likely to get snared. But we usually don't get those kinds of numbers. I mean, I've trapped as many as 4 at a time, but I think it even takes more than that. So we quickly switched to the methods we use to catch when they were out, vultures that we use out here, and eagles and ravens as well. And so I'll talk about that in a minute here. But this is pointing to the Ocean Shores Peninsula and the place where the airport is, where we trapped 2 of these birds. And there is an arrow that kind of shows where the airport is. Well, you might wonder, why would you be setting bait out at an airport? Well, it's a sleepy little airport that gets maybe one or 2 flights on a day, sometimes more. But the airport grounds and the estuary and grassland to the east of it, where that arrow, just to the right of it, where that arrow is owned by Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. And in fact, that's a hunting area out there. And the city leases it from the state, and there's a berm there just at the east edge of the airport, on the right side of that airport runway there, that the city feels very comfortable dumping dead deer carcasses out there. So when deer die on the streets of Ocean Shores, they dump them on state land just off the airport. And again, since there isn't much traffic out there, it doesn't create an issue for the light planes that come in. It's just, there's no jets coming in here. It's a fairly small little airport. And it's turned out to be very handy for us, because the fact that the vultures, they dump deer carcasses out there year round, and so the vultures know about it, and they're there. Not many, of course, in the winter, but from spring, summer, and fall, the vultures are there. And so, and the street department likes our project, and they even tell us when there's a deer we can pick up. And in fact, here's a text from John Wagner, the manager of the street department. I have a fresh one that was just dispatched. If you want it. I said, sure. And then he says it's under the steps in a bag, not very big. And so we use a net launcher, which is basically it's a net that shoots out of a box, pulled forward by 3 padded projectiles that are propelled forward by the firing of, off of 3 .22 caliber blanks inside that box. And in this case, we caught 3 out of 4 vultures that were feeding on a carcass, or a bow net. This is the capture of Grayland right here. In 2018, we also use a bow net often. So now I'll just say a little bit about each one of these birds. This is Aries flight, and that bird sadly only lasted 2 months. It flew up from the airport up onto the Quinault Indian Reservation, where 2 months after it was released, a signal went off the air. So Glenn Marquardt here on the far right in this picture, and I went up and talked to some natural resource biologists from the Quinault tribe, and to see if we could find the bird. And what we found was a brush pile, and actually some elk carcass remains alongside the road there, piled up, and just north of that silver vehicle, which is my forerunner there. Glenn noticed first a dead vulture in the ditch, and the young guys there said to us, well, they shoot vultures around here, and it didn't appear that this was our bird area, but it's a common, sadly, a practice that they did that. So we figured that the bird was shot and the transmitter tag was ripped off and the transmitter was thrown in the river there. The other three all made migrations to Mexico that fall, and Artful Dodger, Koi, and Grayland. That yellow arrow indicates the location of Mexico City, Mexico. So I'll talk about each one of these a little bit here. So again, this is where Artful Dodger was trapped on the at the airport, and he I'm going to back up one here. So I live right here, and turns out that he spent a lot of time going back and forth through this area, and I sighted him on numerous occasions. I think that vulture was recited a total of 8 times, and I had most of them. And we tracked him through telemetry over to this area right here, and this is where we are close up. And it turns out there was a roost there, and he roosted there with several other turkey vultures. So I set up a trail camera. So here's the roost, and this is where the trail camera was, and put some fish out on a dock, and got these really cool pictures. Here's this bridge, and there's a truck going over it, and there's Artful Dodger. You can maybe see his antenna there, feeding with some of his buddies. You can see 2 other vultures on some fish I put out. So he went in a second migration to Mexico. He wound up in this location, and we started getting odd signals, and wasn't moving around after a while. And in December of 2019, and Lori Goodrich contacted Kashmir Wolf, who was a Veracruz River of Raptors coordinator, and Kashmir and his wife went out there and found the transmitter and the wing tag in this, what amounted to a cactus farm. We don't know how the bird died. It was months after we got the signal stopped that we finally, someone got out there, but it's great to get that far. There were some feathers on the ground as well. And to recover the transmitter is good because they can be refurbished and used again. So Grayland, I'll talk about next. This is Grayland's first migration here, shown here, the track that he took from the beach at Grayland and on up. He crossed the Strait of Juan de Fuca. This is something like 10, 15 miles across. Spent his summer on Vancouver Island. And then this area here is called the Sunshine Coast, over to the mainland. And then he crossed over right here. This is the closest land point to the Olympic Peninsula of Washington State, and then went down this way. And while he was over here, he was photographed by some kayakers, which is kind of neat. There we go. At Hudson Rock Ecological Reserve. And so I've got some pictures of that. So these I shared, they're just as a result of getting reports from the bird banding lab, where I find out some particulars about the sighting, and then I always call for additional information. And so here's Grayland perched at the Ecological Reserve in September of 2018. And then the next year, we got a report. The next year and every year thereafter, from 2019 on through 2022, Grayland did not return this way. He returned up this way and stayed east of Vancouver Island, up in this valley here. If you've ever heard of, maybe you've been skiing at Whistler, it's right up in here. This is Vancouver, Canada here. So Grayland stays up in this valley, and he goes back and forth during the summer. He makes forays down to the city and then goes back up. And during one of those forays on June 26, 2019, he was photographed by Pat Smart, who is a member of this Delta, this bird society. And I got a hold of her, and she had this wonderful picture. In 2021, Frank Grayland was recited by Keith Condon just east of Los Angeles on his migration south. And it was kind of neat because it happened to be in a kettle with 125 turkey vultures and 5 Swainson's hawks. So the birds that we have don't travel together. We tagged 3 that migrated down 2 falls in a row, and they don't migrate, but they join up with others, both in fall migration and spring. They often travel together, at least, and they often will like roost together. So what's a kettle? Well, there's a definition of kettle for you. And that's from Keith Bilstein's book, Migrating Raptors of the World, by the way, courtesy of Keith. Well, here's a wonderful image provided by David Barber to me a few days ago to share this evening with you that gives an overview of the data that they've collected from the turkey vultures they put satellite transmitters on. And so, and the numbers, the sample sizes are given here in the legend. And you can see that the birds from Pennsylvania, migrate as far as Florida, and Saskatchewan go the farthest. And they trap birds at a cattle lot in Arizona, and those birds migrated as well, as you can see there. And then you can see here are the birds of the Pacific Northwest area in the far western United States. So California, Washington, with a sample size of 8. So R4 being part of that group. And Grayland is responsible for what we see up here in British Columbia. But as I mentioned, Jill Radcliffe has put transmitters on 2 birds, and she's also a collaborator with Hawk Mountain and Andrea Bonasoli Alquati and here in the West. So we're really helping fill the picture. And so I got started with this project, the telemetry, when Keith approached me and asked me if I'd be interested in getting involved, because they wanted to fill out the picture in North America by getting some birds from the far west. So it's been pretty exciting. And you can see they've also done some work in South America. So the total number of resightings of the wing-tagged birds is actually relatively low. You can see there 8 from Artful Dodger, and most of those are mine, and then just 4 for Grayland, 1 for Koi, and none for the rest of the birds. So the telemetry has been very useful, but the information we get from the resightings is actually good supplemental information to what we get from the full year-round movement patterns that we get from the telemetry. Okay, so this shows the resightings of wing-tagged turkey vultures, the wing tags only, and just a little bit of data here. So we had 20 vultures with no race sightings at all. That's actually pretty good. 34 out of 54 were recited at least once, is the glass half full way to look at that. And 19 with 1 to 5 resightings, and on up the list there, and 2 with 31 or more sightings. The average number of resightings per vulture is 5.1, and if you take out, remove those with that were never recited. So among those recited at least once, the average number of recitings is really quite good, 9.5 per individual, with a maximum number of recitings being 37. So putting a tag on a turkey vulture is like putting a message in a bottle. You just never know who will encounter and what you'll learn. So I'm just going to give a few examples here to close out. 4 of our vultures, some additional information we learned from wing tags alone. So here's 3 of them on the map. So AR being the first, he was been recited 5 times. He was tagged on the Grayland beach. He was one of the birds that was under the net launch, the net of the net launcher I showed earlier in the program. He was one of the ones we caught that day. So all 5 of his recitings have been on the south end of Vancouver Island. One in particular that's pretty special is this one on where Joaquin Bertrands saw him with more than 200 turkey vultures at the south end. This is that staging area where the south end of the peninsula, the closest land to the Olympic Peninsula. And this is Grayland's pattern that I mentioned to you from his first year migration, where he crossed there. And Jill Radcliffe's vultures, the 2 that she put transmitters on, I believe she said they both also crossed at this same point. So some very useful information that was bolstered greatly by some data from an observer that reported to the bird banding lab that then reported to me. AK is another one of our vultures. It has had more recitings than any other of our wing tag birds, sighted every spring or summer or maybe early fall on the coast of Oregon. So this photo here, each dot represents at least one reciting. So here's where the bird was tagged. This is Cape Meares on the Oregon coast, and you can see these are all the recitings with the exception of one that we got off elsewhere in Oregon, like I think it's called Eagle, Oregon, where we figured he was on migration. So he's showing great fidelity, and we see this in some of our other vultures as well, a large number of them, but not quite as strongly as we're seeing the pattern here, to some extent because there's a lot of people out and watching, and there's actually an observation deck here, and actually there's more than 2 points here. They're kind of stacked on top of each other, where people have seen this bird that likes to soar around over this area in the summer. So we got some great information on sight fidelity from this bird. Another exciting one is EP, 17 recitings in the winters of 2019, 20, and 2021. That one was tagged on the Oregon coast near Toledo, Oregon. And it roosts in a park called William Land Park in Sacramento. And all those recitings were by Dan Areola, who's done research on these birds, and they've been roosting in this park for years and years. And he actually has a study going, and it started years ago when in 2009 and 10, that winter, and then 2010-11, he monitored the vultures roosting in that park. And so this is September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, on through, and actually monitored year round here. And you can see the peak numbers are incredibly high, over 300 in October of 2019. And then here you've got almost 500 in this park in October of 2010. So some really great data, and he actually published this. And so 10 years later, he went back to the park, and that's when he saw our bird as one of the many, which is very good information, because it's one of a few that we have wing tags on that we know does not go to Mexico, but winters elsewhere, and that's good data to have. So last but not least, Turkey Vulture AP, which I trapped in my neighbor's yard right there. And this is my house. And so he was trapped with two others. I'm not sure which one of these three he is. We didn't have the tags on yet. I don't have a picture of AP in the hand before release, but this kind of illustrates what they do when they get under the net. They really don't fight and struggle. They just kind of lay there. And one thing I've heard and learned is that, turkey vultures have this habit when they get stressed, not only of losing blood from their heads, but also just getting lethargic. And so you can see the one I've got there is hanging its head, and it probably did a little vomiting downward at that point. And the others are just kind of laying there. So we tagged AP in 2014, and then June 10th of 2016, it was sighted down on a backwater of the Columbia River by none other than Tony Starlight. And in fact, he had 11 resightings between 2016 and 2020. He lived on this backwater in one of these houses right along here, and he just saw the bird fly over his head, and with a naked eye, he was actually that first time able to read the tag. And then over the years, he saw the bird in the field out here, and there's a tree over here. I'll show you a photo in a second of the bird in a tree, and they would come out here and feed when it was flooded like this. One time he said they were out there eating fish that washed in there. And then another year, they were out there, and there had been hay. The field had been hayed, and they were out there. And one thing about turkey vultures is that they have, as I said, a very good sense of smell, and the haying results in some small mammal mortality, and they come in and eat the voles and other things that die during the haying operation. So I got a report from the banding lab about Tony's reciting, and you notice here there's a band number here. So we can't put bands on them, but the banding lab assigns a band number. That's the way that they to track them. They need a band number in order to track them in their database. So when I got it, I got the band number, and I had to look in my file to see which one it was. And I made a note there, Wayman's Yard, that's the neighbor's yard. And Tony Starlight. So there's his email, and the name piqued my interest. And so I emailed him, and I always have a series of questions I ask. Were they traveling? How many vultures were within 100 meters of the bird when you saw it? And were any of the other vultures tagged in the group? And if so, what were the codes on those, and some other questions? And he was really good about answering the questions. And he got a certificate of appreciation, which any reporter can get if they have the option to do that once they report online. So there's his, and there's a photo he took of AP, one of his better ones. He's real good with the camera, and he's gotten a lot of good photos over the years of AP, and wonderful photo. He actually does a bird calendar, or he did up until recently, as far as I know. He moved to South Carolina during the pandemic, and he has a showroom in Portland, Oregon, and so you can go there and have dinner and watch him perform, and it's a lot of fun. And so went to the show and saw him, and we got to be actually friends, and he joined us on the beach a number of times, and it was really fun, and caught a peregrine or two when he was out there. And we actually did a bird festival together in Ridgefield in 2017. We wrote some songs for it. One of them was a Band on the Bird. Here we are performing that. And so we actually had a situation where I knew Tony was going to be on the beach for a survey, and I was going to have Garrett Vinn, who is a videographer and photographer for the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. At the same time, we stayed at Charlotte Killing's bed and breakfast in Ocean Park, and we went out on the beach, and Garrett recorded us singing Band on the Bird. So I want to play that for now to end my program, and then we'll have questions. Make sure it's loud enough. Oh, it's all the way up. Okay, here we go.
This is my friend and raptor buddy, Tony Starlight. He's got a special song that's Band on the Bird. Take it away, Tony.
Where the birds exploded with a mighty flash as they flew up from the sand. And the first one said to the second one there, did you see that band? Band on the bird. Band on the bird. Raptor Dan and the singing man are teaching everyone. See the band on the bird. Band on the bird. Band on the bird. Band on the bird. Well, we drove up closer and the flock dispersed as the cameras start to click. We scanned the flock looking for the band so that we could take a pic. Band on the bird. Band on the bird. See the band, know the plan. It's good for everyone. See the band on the bird. Band on the bird. Band on the bird. Band on the bird. Well, we took our pictures and we made them big to see what we could find. We got the numbers and we passed them on to the wedding band online. Band on the bird. Band on the bird. See the band, know the plan. We'll search forevermore for the band on the bird. 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 Band on the bird.
There's a little more here.
Band on the bird. Band on the bird. Band on the bird.
All right, that's it. Oops,
The thing that's different about a verbal vacation home,
sorry about
you always
this.
have the whole place to
Uh,
yourself.
Figure out what to do here.
No stranger at the dinner
Uh.
table making things awkward.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Varland, for an awesome presentation. I do have a few questions here if you'd like to go ahead and answer some of those.
Sure.
All right, so I have a few questions here from our friend Katie. Let's see here. So a question here I have from Katie is regarding the story that you told earlier about finding the vulture that you believe to have been shot and was off on the side of the road. They were asking a question regarding that, if Fish and Wildlife can hold the people accountable. Do you know anything about that process?
Well, it would be, it's really be hard to follow up on. For example, the follow up with a little bit more on that story. We were asked, the database consultant for coastal raptors actually works at the tribal office for the tribe and natural resources, and we asked her to go out there and pick that vulture up the next day. Just maybe we could take a closer look at it and see if we could learn something. It was gone. So I don't think we don't really have any direct evidence. So I'm sure that if the tribal police were to find out, get that kind of information, I would expect that there would be some sort of, at least slap on the wrist for it, if nothing else. But it's all birds, migratory birds in North America. All birds except the introduced species are protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, I should say. And so there are penalties at the federal level for, killing and injuring birds, but nothing really we could follow up on there in this particular case.
Very good. Alrighty, our next question, this one's also from Katie, and they asked, what have you noticed on turkey vulture social structure? They said dominant bird versus submissive bird, for example.
Well, seems like the older ones tend to be dominant over food, and we sit there by the hour watching carcasses and waiting for an opportunity to trap, but it's not really a behavioral study per se, but we certainly have noticed that.
Mm-hmm. This question is from Karen, and when you were talking earlier about that you're unable to know the sex of these birds because it requires doing a DNA test. Is it possible to, when you're collecting these birds, to put the wing tags on them, to take feathers, to then take back to do those DNA tests? They said that it seems like it would be interesting information.
Yeah, I should also mention that one colleague I've talked with said that the blood tests are equivocal, that they don't work that well. But that was one person's comment, but and I'm not so sure about that. But it may be possible. Even now, I've got blood cells saved. We spin the blood down and we send out a serum or plasma to look for avian influenza and things like that. And I could potentially even do it now with the blood cells I have on hand. It probably would be interesting. As far as the feather goes, you could do it if you got the root. You can't just clip it. And in that case, you might have enough blood to do it from a feather.
Very good. Okay, this question, let's see here. This one was asking if if any migrants stop through Virginia, and they said that I guess they live in Virginia. They said they have some partial migrants there, but they saw a group of 30 hanging out all together a few weeks ago, and they usually don't see that many in a group where they live.
Well, I'm sure that's what was happening. That was a bunch of birds on migration. In my newsletter coming up, I do a newsletter once a year, and it's coming out here in a week or so. And I've got an account from a woman down in Southern California that heard them rustling in the trees one night before she and her husband went to bed. And when they got up in the morning, there were dozens of turkey vultures in the trees in their yard. And so I have some photos and an account of that. And I think Candace is listening tonight and to this program. And and those birds were certainly on migration. So yeah. So I would suspect those in Virginia were doing the same.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this comment was talking about the way that the turkey vultures look with their heads, and it said that they see a lot of similarities to a reptilian head. They said vultures have reptilian heads, right? Evidence for evolution from dinosaurs to birds.
Well, I can't really comment on that. I don't feel qualified, but yeah, I think there's a lot. Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in that.
Mm-hmm.
Just off the top of my head. My head.
Right. And then our final question here is not a question. It is from Suzanne, and she said, "You're a rock star. Great job. Very interesting." So thank you so much, Dr. Varland. It was a pleasure. Is there a way for people to get a hold of that newsletter that you mentioned?
Yeah, it will be posted on the Coastal Raptors website within a couple of weeks. If you go to the website, there's a contact place on there on the homepage, and I can email you one if you want to get a hold of me. My email address is there. I'm happy to communicate with people. And so the safest email for me is dan.varland@comcast.net. So dan.varland@comcast.net.
Excellent. I just put it in the chat if anyone wants to take a look. So yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Varland. It was a pleasure. For anyone that is local to the East Coast by Hawk Mountain, just wanted to share some things that we have coming up in the next couple weeks. On this Saturday coming up and the following Saturday, we have our Talent Talk, which is live raptor presentations with some of Hawk Mountain's education ambassadors. And we have tons of great holiday goodies in our bookstore for the nature lover in your life. We also have an online store, so check out hawkmountain.org. So thank you everyone for joining us virtually today. Dr. Varland, thank you again. It was an absolute pleasure.
Glad to be here. Thank you. I enjoyed it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a great night, everybody. Thanks.
Take care.